Throughout history, some disappearances leave behind more than just questions. They leave behind echoes, shadows, and an unsettling sense that the world doesn't play by the rules we thought it did. Tonight, we open the doors to 5 vanishing acts that defy all logic. Each case is real, each one remains unsolved, and each leaves us with the same haunting question. How can a person, a ship, or even a legend simply vanish into nothing?
Three men vanished without a trace from a locked lighthouse on a storm-battered Scottish isle, leaving behind a half-eaten meal, overturned chairs, and a silence so heavy it has haunted investigators for over a century. In December 1900, the Flannan Isles lighthouse, perched on the desolate cliffs of Eilean Moor, was manned by 3 keepers, Thomas Marshall, James Ducat, and Donald MacArthur. On the 26th of December, the relief vessel Hesperus arrived, only to find the lighthouse dark. The relief keeper Joseph Moore was sent ashore. What he discovered would become one of the sea's most enduring enigmas. The entrance gate was closed, the door to the quarters was unlocked. Inside, the beds were neatly made, but the clock had stopped, and the kitchen table held untouched food. Only one set of oilskins, the heavy gear required to endure the brutal Atlantic winds, remained hanging. Whoever left had walked out into the elements underdressed. The logbook provided disturbing details. On December 12th, Marshall noted severe winds, the likes I have never seen before in 20 years. The following days brought increasingly strange entries. Ducat was described as very quiet, MacArthur as crying. MacArthur was known as a tough, seasoned mariner, hardly the type to weep under pressure. On December 15th, the final entry read simply, "Storm ended, sea calm. God is over all." After that, the record falls silent. But there was no storm recorded in the area on those dates. Nearby coastal stations reported only moderate weather. This contradiction fueled endless speculation. Had the men imagined the storm? Had something unnatural visited the rock? Investigators found ropes, usually stored in a crate, strewn across the western landing platform, 110 feet above sea level. A railing was twisted, as if struck by a massive wave. The official inquiry suggested that one or more of the men had gone to secure the equipment, only to be swept away by a rogue wave. Perhaps the others rushed to help, leaving in such haste they abandoned their protective gear. But the theory left gaps. Why had all 3 gone together, violating protocol that required one man remain inside? Why the bizarre log entries, hinting at fear, silence, and despair before their disappearance? Sailors passing the Isles in later years told tales of strange figures waving from the cliffs, only for no one to be found ashore. Others whispered of curses tied to the isolated rocks, which had long been feared by fishermen. The Flannan Isles were steeped in superstition, a place where ancient Celts once believed spirits dwelled among the stones. More than a century later, no bodies were ever recovered. No conclusive evidence has ever explained what compelled 3 seasoned men to walk into the storm. All that remains is the darkened lighthouse, its keeper's fate swallowed by the sea and left as a riddle carved into the winds of the North Atlantic. And yet, the Flannan Isles mystery was only the first in a series of vanishings that would baffle the world. Just decades later, another disappearance would captivate headlines across the globe. Not 3 lighthouse keepers, but one of the most famous women in history. If you dare to follow deeper into the shadows of these vanishings, let your mark be left upon this channel. Subscribe and ring the bell, for in the world of dark dimensions, the next disappearance could come without warning.
The world listened as Amelia Earhart's voice whispered through the static. Then, in an instant, she was gone. No crash, no wreckage, just silence hanging over the Pacific like a curse. On July 2nd, 1937, Amelia Earhart and her navigator, Fred Noonan, embarked on the most dangerous leg of their around-the-world flight, from Lae, New Guinea, to Howland Island, a tiny strip of land in the vast Pacific. Earhart's Lockheed Electra carried enough fuel for 20 hours of flight. She was expected to land by mid-morning. She never arrived. The U.S. Coast Guard cutter, Itasca, stationed at Howland, received intermittent radio transmissions from Earhart. "We must be on you but cannot see you," she reported. "Gas is running low." At 8:43 a.m., her last message crackled. "We are on the line 157337. We'll repeat this message. We will repeat this on 6210 kilocycles. Wait." Then, silence. The largest air and sea search in history up to that time scoured 250,000 square miles of ocean. Not a trace was found. No plane, no bodies, nothing. Theories multiplied. Some claimed she simply ran out of fuel and crashed into the sea. Others believed she landed on Gardner Island, now Nikumaroro, where fragments of aluminum and a woman's shoe were later discovered. In 1940, British colonial officer Gerald Gallagher found human bones on the island, along with a sextant box. But the bones were misplaced, and later analysis from surviving measurements suggested they may have belonged to a man. Another theory points to Japanese-controlled islands. Some suggest Earhart and Noonan were captured, accused of espionage, and executed. Residents of Saipan later claimed to have seen a woman matching Earhart's description under guard. Still others whisper that the U.S. government staged her disappearance for intelligence purposes, a claim historians dismiss, but which refuses to fade. What makes Earhart's case so haunting is the sheer scale of her fame. She was a global icon, celebrated for her daring spirit. And yet, when she vanished, the world could do nothing but listen to the empty static of her last calls. Her disappearance turned from a personal tragedy into a collective wound, one that questioned the limits of human achievement against the immensity of nature. To this day, expeditions continue to search the Pacific floor for her Electra, armed with sonar and submersibles. The ocean, however, keeps its secrets well. The silence that fell over the radio waves in 1937 has never lifted. But if the vanishing of Amelia Earhart seemed unfathomable, the next disappearance would carry with it the weight of war, secrecy, and a mystery set not above the seas, but in the frozen skies over Europe.
On a frozen December morning in 1944, Glenn Miller boarded a small plane, and with him vanished the very soundtrack of hope. No body, no wreckage, only a melody cut short in midair. Glenn Miller was not just a musician. By the time World War II reached its height, he was the most popular band leader in the world. His orchestra's smooth swing had lifted American spirits through the Great Depression, and now, in uniform, he aimed to do the same for Allied troops overseas. On December 15, 1944, Miller was scheduled to fly from an airfield in Bedford, England, to Paris, where he was to prepare for a grand Christmas concert. He boarded a single-engine Norseman aircraft, piloted by John Morgan, with one passenger, Lieutenant Colonel Norman Basil. At 1:55 p.m., the plane took off. It was never seen again. The weather that day was poor, cold, with fog and low visibility. But even in dangerous conditions, flights were not uncommon. When Miller failed to arrive in Paris, the U.S. Army Air Forces launched an investigation.
no wreckage was ever found in the English Channel. Rumors spread quickly. Some suggested Miller had died of a heart attack before boarding. Others whispered darker tales, that he had been captured by the Nazis, or even assassinated for stumbling upon wartime secrets. Conspiracy theories spun wildly, but the evidence remained elusive. In later years, one theory gained traction. On the same day Miller's plane vanished, a squadron of Royal Air Force bombers aborted a mission and jettisoned their unused bombs over the Channel. Some historians speculate Miller's Norsemen may have flown directly into the deadly drop. If true, his death was not a tale of espionage, but of tragic misfortune, caught in the blind cruelty of war. And yet, without wreckage or remains, the truth could never be confirmed. Miller's disappearance resonated differently than most vanishings. It wasn't only the loss of a man, but of his music. His orchestra carried on under his name, but without his presence, the sound was changed. The joyous swing that once filled dance halls now carried a mournful note, an echo of a leader lost somewhere over the Channel. For the soldiers awaiting him in Paris, there would be no Christmas concert. For the millions who adored him at home, there was only silence. Glenn Miller, the man who gave the world rhythm in its darkest hours, had himself been silenced. But war was not the only stage where strange disappearances occurred. Decades later, on a lonely highway in Minnesota, a young man's voice would vanish in real time, captured not in history books, but in the haunting memory of a phone call.
Imagine staying on the phone with your child for nearly an hour, hearing his footsteps in the night, his voice growing fainter, until a sudden cry splits the silence, and then nothing. This was the nightmare endured by the parents of Brandon Swanson. On the night of May 14, 2008, 19-year-old Brandon was driving home to Marshall, Minnesota, after celebrating the end of his college semester. Just after midnight, his car veered off a gravel road and became stuck in a ditch near the small town of Lind. Brandon called his parents, Brian and Annette. Calm but frustrated, he explained that he was unhurt but needed a ride. Using landmarks, he believed he was near Lind, so his parents drove out to find him. But when they arrived, he was nowhere to be seen. For nearly 47 minutes, Brandon stayed on the phone with his father, describing his attempts to walk toward lights in the distance, which he thought belonged to the town. At one point, he laughed nervously, saying, "Oh, you guys can't see me?" As the minutes passed, his voice grew strained. Then, at 2:30 a.m., his father heard Brandon suddenly exclaim, "Oh, shh," followed by silence. The call ended. Attempts to call back went unanswered. Search efforts began immediately. Brandon's car was eventually found, but far from Lind, miles away near Taunton. Investigators concluded that Brandon had misjudged his location. Despite massive searches involving dogs, volunteers, and the National Guard, no trace of him was ever discovered. Theories abound. Some believe Brandon fell into the nearby Yellow Medicine River and drowned, though extensive searches of the water turned up nothing. Others suspect foul play, and yet no evidence of struggle, no belongings, no remains were ever found. What unsettled investigators most was the clarity of his final call. His parents heard his footsteps. They heard the shifting of his phone. They were practically walking with him through the darkness. And then, the abrupt end. No splash, no scream, just a cut into silence. For Brian and Annette, the pain lingers not just in the loss of their son, but in the cruel immediacy of the memory. They were there with him, right until the moment he vanished. It was a disappearance not hidden in the fog of war, nor swallowed by the vastness of the ocean, but one that unfolded in real time, leaving only questions that still echo in the Minnesota night. But the story of Brandon Swanson is not unique. The sea, too, holds its tales of ships found adrift, crews gone without a trace, and mysteries that suggest entire worlds swallowed by the deep.
She drifted across the Pacific like a tomb. Engines dead, bloodstains on deck, and 25 souls erased as if the ocean had swallowed them whole. On November 10, 1955, the MV Joyita, a merchant vessel, was discovered adrift north of Fiji. She was 5 weeks overdue, having left Samoa for the Tokelau Islands with 25 passengers and crew aboard. When found, the vessel was partially submerged, but still afloat thanks to her cork-lined hull. The scene on board was chilling. The radio was tuned to the international distress frequency, but its wiring had been deliberately cut. Lifeboats and navigational equipment were missing. Blood-stained bandages were found, suggesting someone had been injured. Cargo, including medical supplies, timber, and food, was missing as well. Yet there were no signs of struggle, no bodies, no survivors. An official inquiry concluded the vessel had taken on water due to a corroded pipe. Believing the ship was sinking, the passengers may have abandoned her in lifeboats. But experts argue this makes little sense. The Joyita was famously unsinkable, and abandoning her for small lifeboats in the vast Pacific would have been suicide. Other theories emerged. Some suggest piracy, though no evidence of boarding was found. Others point to mutiny or a medical emergency that caused panic. The cut radio wires remain one of the most disturbing clues. Who severed them? And why disable the only means of calling for help? Adding to the mystery, the Joyita's logbook and chronometer were missing, as if deliberately taken. Even the crew's personal belongings were gone, suggesting they had left intentionally. But under what circumstances? For decades, the Joyita has been compared to the Mary Celeste, the most famous ghost ship in maritime lore. But unlike that 19th century enigma, the Joyita vanished not in the age of sail, but in the modern world, under the watch of radios, shipping lanes, and international patrols. And still, the Pacific holds its silence. 25 lives vanished into history, leaving only an empty vessel as their tombstone. The fate of the Joyita's passengers remains one of the greatest maritime mysteries of the 20th century. Were they swallowed by storms? Murdered by unseen hands? Or did they slip, like so many others in this chronicle, into a dimension beyond our understanding? 5 stories, 5 vanishings, each one separated by decades, oceans, and circumstances, yet bound together by one chilling truth. When the world loses someone to mystery, it leaves behind not just grief, but an echo that refuses to fade. And in that echo, we are reminded, disappearance is not absence, it is presence unresolved, a shadow that waits forever at the edge of understanding.
These 5 vanishing acts remain written in history, yet none have been given a final chapter. Perhaps the truth is out there, waiting to be uncovered. Or perhaps some mysteries were never meant to be solved. Tell us, which of these disappearances chills you the most? Share your thoughts below. And remember, in the world of Dark Dimensions X, the unknown is always closer than it seems. And if you wish to keep wandering these dark corridors with us, subscribe and let the bell toll for you every time another shadowed mystery emerges.